The box wasn't large. That was the first thing Marcus Hale noticed. 34 years of service to the crown, and everything Doris Fenwick was being allowed to carry out of Buckingham Palace fit inside a cardboard box that had once held printer paper. He could tell by the faded brand lettering still visible along the bottom flap. She wasn't crying. That was the second thing. She walked through the staff corridor off the North Service entrance with the box held against her chest, both arms wrapped around it the way you'd carry something fragile, not something heavy. Her chin was level. Her pace was measured. She didn't look at the two administrative staff flanking her, one on each side, close enough to guide without touching. She looked at the walls, like she was memorizing them, like she already knew she wouldn't be back. Hale had been at Buckingham Palace for 11 minutes. He hadn't been shown to his post yet. He was still standing in the staff orientation corridor with his transfer paperwork in one hand and his kit bag over his shoulder, waiting for his escort to return from a phone call that had apparently become complicated. He watched Doris Fenwick walk past. She didn't look at him, but she slowed just slightly, just for a fraction of a second, as she passed the spot where he stood. Her eyes moved to his uniform, not his face. His uniform, the red of it, the brass of it, the thing it meant. Then she was gone through the service door, and the door swung shut behind her, and the corridor was empty again. Hale stood in the silence. He filed it, said nothing, picked up his kit bag when his escort returned, and followed the man through the palace to his assigned post. But he didn't forget the box. He didn't forget the walls. His record had preceded him to Buckingham Palace the way reputations always do in closed institutions. Quietly, incompletely, and slightly wrong. What the palace staff knew. Sergeant Marcus Hale, 14 years on the Windsor Castle permanent detail. 3 commendations, no disciplinary record, requested transfer approved by the Senior Household Protection Office. What the palace staff didn't know. The commendations were filed under restricted access. 2 of them involved situations that hadn't made the internal logs in any form anyone was permitted to discuss. The third was for something that happened during a private visit that officially hadn't happened at all. What nobody told the palace when they sent Hale's file: he hadn't requested the transfer. He'd been transferred because someone at Windsor had decided, quietly and without explanation, that his particular way of doing things was better suited somewhere else. That was the language used. Better suited. The way you move a piece on a board when the square it's occupying has become inconvenient, but the piece itself is too useful to discard. Hale understood this. He didn't argue it. He packed his kit, signed the paperwork, and arrived at Buckingham Palace on a Tuesday morning in early autumn with 14 years of institutional knowledge, a preference for silence, and the specific ability to read a room the way a surveyor reads land, not for what it looked like, but for what it was built to conceal. He was 41 years old. He had the kind of face that people forgot between conversations and the kind of stillness that made rooms feel slightly more serious when he entered them. Not threatening, just present. The way a load-bearing wall is present. You don't notice it until you consider what happens without it. His post was the East Wing ground corridor. Long, carpeted, lined with portraits of people who had wielded enormous power with varying degrees of wisdom. 2 service doors. 1 access point to the staff stairwell. 1 camera positioned at the far end that had been installed at the wrong angle for the last 6 years, and had never been corrected, because correcting it would require a facilities request, and the facilities request would require a senior household sign-off, and the senior household sign-off had been pending since the previous controller's tenure. Hale noticed the camera angle on day 1. He said nothing about it. He filed it, the way he filed everything, in the part of his mind reserved for facts that weren't useful yet. She found him on day 3. 4:47 in the afternoon. The corridor was quiet. The state rooms above had finished their touring hours, and the staff movement had settled into the slower rhythm of early evening preparation. Hale was at his post, completely still. The way he always was, not rigid, not performative, just settled, like a man who had made peace with the fact that standing was his work and had decided to be good at it. He heard her before he saw her. Flat shoes on carpet, a particular cadence, not hurried, but not wandering either. Purposeful in the way that people are purposeful when they've made a decision and are committed to it before doubt can change their mind. Doris Fenwick appeared from the service corridor junction 20 feet to his left. She looked different from the morning he'd seen her. She was in her full uniform now, dark dress, white collar, the small enamel pin that senior housekeeping staff were awarded after 25 years. She walked directly toward him and stopped at a distance that was professional, not intimate, not aggressive, calibrated. She looked at his face this time, not his uniform. "You're the one from Windsor," she said, not a question. "Yes," Hale said. She reached into the pocket of her dress and withdrew a folded piece of paper. Not new paper, old paper, the kind that had been folded and unfolded enough times to go soft at the creases, the kind that had lived in a pocket or a drawer or the back of something for long enough to carry the texture of time. She held it out to him. He didn't take it immediately. "What is this?" he asked. "A duty roster," she said. "From the 5th of March, 1989. He looked at her. "Your first day." Something moved in her face. Not surprise, recognition, the slight recalibration of a person who had expected to have to explain more. "Read the margin," she said. "The right-hand margin about halfway down." He took the paper. He didn't unfold it yet. "Mrs. Fenwick," he said quietly, "if you're about to tell me something that requires me to act, I need you to understand what I can and cannot do from this post." She looked at him steadily. "I know what a guard can do," she said. "I've worked inside these walls for 34 years. I know exactly what you can do." A pause. "That's why I'm here," she said. Then she turned and walked back the way she had come, disappearing through the service corridor junction without looking back. Hale stood for a moment with the folded paper in his gloved hand. Then he looked down the empty corridor, both directions, and carefully opened it. The roster was exactly what she'd said. A staff duty sheet, faded to the color of old tea. Typed on a machine that no longer existed anywhere in the palace. Names in columns, dates, shift assignments, the bureaucratic skeleton of a single working day 35 years ago. The right-hand margin, halfway down. Someone had written in pencil, careful but quick, the handwriting of a person who didn't have much time but needed to make sure it was legible. Not a signature, not a name, a reference number, and below it 4 words. "This connects to Wentworth." Hale read it twice. He folded the paper exactly as it had been folded, returned it to his inside breast pocket, and spent the remainder of his shift doing what he always did. Standing watching filing. That night in the staff quarters below the East Wing, he sat on the edge of his bunk and opened his laptop and looked up the name Wentworth in every cross-reference document he had legitimate access to through the household protection system. He found 3 references. 2 were administrative, dates, signatures, sign-offs on routine maintenance requests, procedural paper trails that went nowhere interesting. The 3rd was a complaint, filed in 1989, marked reviewed, marked resolved, no further documentation attached, which was itself unusual because resolved complaints in a palace administration left paper the way rivers left sediment, naturally, inevitably in layers. Unless someone had removed the layers. Hale closed the laptop and sat in the dark. He didn't sleep for a long time. She met him once more. He hadn't asked her to. She simply appeared in the linen corridor below the East Wing service level 2 days later at 6:15 in the morning, before the day staff arrived, in the particular silence of a building that hadn't woken up yet. She was already there when he arrived, standing near the shelving with her hands folded in front of her, still and patient, like someone who had waited in rooms her whole professional life and had made a discipline of it. Hale stopped a few feet from her. "The reference number," he said quietly. "From an internal financial review," she said, "conducted in 1988. The controller at the time flagged an irregularity in the household procurement accounts. Someone signed off on a block of expenditure that didn't match the corresponding purchase orders." She paused. "The review was closed. The controller who raised it retired the following spring, earlier than expected." "And the current signature," Hale said, "the one connected to that reference number." Doris Fenwick looked at him. "Raymond Voss signed 2 of the current restructuring authorizations using a procurement authority he was granted 6 months ago," she said. "The same authority category that was used to suppress the 1988 review. I found it when I was archiving the household administration records. Old files, new signature, same authorization code." Hale said nothing. "3 members of staff who were present during that original review are still employed here," she continued. "Were still employed. 1 retired suddenly in June. 1 was transferred to the Sandringham detail in August. My restructuring notice came through September the 2nd. She said it without performance, without drama, the way people who have already done their crying in private deliver facts. "They've been removing anyone who could make the connection," Hale said. "They're calling it modernization," she said. "Voluntary early departures, restructured roles. It looks clean from the outside." She looked at him directly. "I have 34 years here, Sergeant. I have never missed a day, never filed a complaint, never asked for anything beyond what my role required. My removal notice cited performance concerns. I have never once in 34 years received a performance concern." Hale held her gaze. "The roster," he said. "I kept it because it was my first day," she said simply. "I wrote that note in the margin because I overheard something I wasn't meant to hear, and I was 27 years old and I didn't know what to do with it, so I wrote it down and kept it. I never thought it would matter." She paused. "It matters now." Hale looked at the shelving behind her. Stacks of pressed linen, white and ordered, the quiet infrastructure of a building that presented itself as flawless. "What do you need from me?" he asked. "I need someone to not look the other way," she said. Then, because she was Doris Fenwick and had spent 34 years saying exactly what she meant and nothing more, she turned and walked out of the linen corridor and left him standing among the pressed white sheets. Hale did not go to his supervising officer. This wasn't insubordination. It was precision. His supervising officer had been at Buckingham Palace for 8 months, appointed under the same administrative restructuring wave that Voss was overseeing. Taking it up the immediate chain was the same as posting a letter to the address that was trying to silence the message. Instead, he did what men like Hale always do when the official route has been deliberately narrowed. He found the older route. Every institution has them. The channels that predate the current administration, the connections that run not through the organizational chart but beneath it, through years of shared service and institutional memory, and the specific trust that accumulates between people who have stood in difficult rooms together and not broken. Hale had 14 years at Windsor. He knew people, not powerful people, durable ones, the kind whose authority came not from their title but from the length and cleanliness of their record. He made 2 calls from a staff telephone in the Household Protection Annex. Short calls, no detail, just a name, a reference number, and a request for a quiet cross-check through the Lord Chamberlain's office administrative review system, a system that existed outside the controller's jurisdiction, because it had been established precisely to provide independent oversight of household administration. Both calls were received without surprise. Neither caller asked him why he hadn't gone through his supervising officer. They already knew. He filed a single internal flag through the Protective Services liaison. Not a complaint, not an allegation, a flag. The specific category, administrative irregularity affecting household staff, independent review requested. The kind of flag that didn't make noise, didn't trigger press, didn't alert the subject. The kind that simply opened a door in a quiet part of the building and let the right people walk through it. Then he returned to his post. And he waited. Raymond Voss arrived in the East Wing ground corridor on a Thursday morning. He was not alone. He had two administrative aides with him, both carrying portfolios, both in suits without insignia. The kind of institutional presence designed to convey authority through volume rather than rank. He walked at the pace of a man who had never been told to slow down in a corridor he controlled. He stopped when he saw Hale. Not because Hale had moved, because Hale hadn't. Voss was somewhere between 50 and 60, the age at which certain men in certain institutions begin to move as though the building itself owes them passage. Silver-haired, precise in his presentation in the way that people are precise when presentation is their primary instrument. His expression carried the particular warmth of a man who had learned that warmth was efficient. "Sergeant," he said, acknowledging without greeting. "Sir," Hale said, nothing more. Voss looked past him toward the service corridor junction. "I understand there may be some confusion regarding Mrs. Fenwick's departure arrangements. We're here to finalize the exit process." "Mrs. Fenwick's access status," Hale said, "is currently under administrative review." Voss blinked once slowly. "I'm sorry." "An independent review flag has been filed through the Household Protective Services liaison," Hale said. "Pending that review, her access status cannot be altered or finalized by any single administrative authority." The warmer of the two aides stepped forward, already smiling. "I think there may be a misunderstanding here, Sergeant. This is a routine restructuring matter. Mrs. Fenwick's role has been formally eliminated as part of the—" "I'm aware of the stated reason," Hale said. He didn't look at the aide. He kept his eyes on Voss. "I'm also aware that the authorization category used to process her removal matches a procurement authority that is currently the subject of a cross-reference request through the Lord Chamberlain's office." The corridor went quiet. Voss's warmth didn't disappear. It adjusted. The way a signal adjusts when it encounters interference, same frequency, different quality. "That's quite a claim," Voss said. "It's a fact," Hale said. "Filed this morning, reference available on request." The second aide, the one who hadn't smiled, took a step forward. "Stand aside, Sergeant. This doesn't fall within your operational remit." Hale turned his head very slightly to look at the aide directly. "My operational remit," he said, "includes identifying and flagging any administrative action that affects the welfare or standing of household staff in this wing. I've done that. The flag is filed. Until that review is completed, Mrs. Fenwick's status is suspended pending outcome." "This isn't your department," Voss said. His voice had cooled, just slightly. The warmth still present but now structural rather than genuine, the way a building retains heat after the fire's gone out. Hale looked at him. "You're right," he said. "It isn't." A pause. "It's hers," he said. 34 years of it." Something moved behind Voss's eyes. Not anger, calculation. The rapid assessment of a man who has spent his career understanding which obstacles can be managed and which ones have already made themselves unmanageable. He looked at Hale for a long moment. "You've just made your first weeks here considerably more complicated," Voss said. Hale said nothing. "The restructuring is authorized at the highest administrative level," the smiling aide tried again. "If you filed a flag without sufficient grounds, that reflects on your own." "The grounds," Hale said quietly, "are a duty roster from 1989, a procurement reference number, and 3 staff departures that follow the same pattern as a suppressed complaint from 1988. He paused. The Lord Chamberlain's office has all three. They've had them since 7 this morning." The aide stopped talking. Voss had gone very still. The kind of still that isn't stillness at all, but the visible surface of something moving fast underneath. "You should come with me," he said finally to Hale. "We should discuss this privately." Hale looked at him. "I'm at my post," he said. A long beat. Then Voss looked at his aides, a look that communicated something Hale couldn't hear but understood completely. The look of a man signaling retreat while constructing the narrative of a strategic repositioning. "We'll revisit the administrative finalization," Voss said, to the corridor as much as to anyone in it, "pending the review outcome." He turned. His aides fell in beside him. Their footsteps moved back the way they'd come, measured and controlled, the pace of people who had not run from anything and were not running now, just walking faster than they had arrived. Hale watched them until they turned the corner. Then he returned to standing, hands behind his back, eyes on the corridor. The camera at the far end sat at its wrong angle, recording the wall it had always recorded, missing everything that mattered. Hale had already filed a facilities request to have it corrected. The review took 11 days. Hale knew this not because anyone told him, but because on the 12th day, the quiet changed quality. Institutions have a sound when something has been decided and the decision is being absorbed, a particular settling, like a building after a storm has passed and the structure is reassessing itself. He heard it on the 12th morning. His supervising officer passed him in the corridor and said nothing, which was different from the previous 11 days of saying nothing, because on those days the silence had been tense, and on the 12th day it was simply quiet. The difference between held breath and regular breathing. That afternoon, a memo came through the Household Protection Internal System. Brief, administrative in language. Mrs. D. Fenwick, senior housekeeper, East Wing reinstatement of access and standing effective immediately pending full review completion. Removal proceedings suspended. Independent oversight engaged. Hale read it once, folded the printed copy, put it in his inside breast pocket. No commendation was filed. No mention of the flag. No reference to Hale's name in any documentation connected to the review. This was standard. This was how these things moved when they moved correctly, not through announcement but through correction, quiet and institutional and permanent. Voss was absent from the East Wing corridors from the 9th day forward. Hale didn't ask why. He didn't need to. He'd been in enough institutions to know that when a man of Voss's particular type stops appearing in a space he previously moved through like he owned it, the space has been reclaimed. The 1988 complaint was reopened. The procurement irregularity was referred for formal audit. The 3 staff departures were reviewed. None of this was loud. None of it was public. It happened the way the palace handled most things that mattered in rooms without windows, by people without titles that meant anything to the outside world. With the specific efficiency of an institution that has survived centuries, by understanding that the fastest way to manage a scandal is to resolve the underlying problem before the scandal has a name. She came on the 13th morning. 6:22. The corridor was quiet. The day staff were beginning to move through the service levels below, the building warming up the way large buildings do gradually, from the inside out. Hale heard her before he saw her. Flat shoes on carpet, that particular cadence, purposeful, decided, committed before doubt could intervene. Doris Fenwick turned the corner from the service junction and walked toward him. She was in full uniform, the dark dress, the white collar, the enamel pin that 25 years had earned, sitting at her lapel like something that had always been there and had never been in any danger of being taken. She looked well, not relieved. He had a sense she was not the kind of woman who wore relief on her face, just settled, the way a person looks when they've been returned to a place that belongs to them. She stopped at the same professional distance as before, the calibrated distance, the one that said she respected what he was and didn't need anything more from him than what he'd already given. She looked at his face. Then she reached into the pocket of her dress and withdrew the folded paper. The duty roster, 1989, the one with soft creases and old typeface and 4 words in pencil in the right-hand margin. She held it out to him. Hale looked at it, then at her. "You should keep it," he said quietly. "I've kept it for 35 years, she said. "I know what it says." Something in her expression, not quite a smile, not quite the absence of one. "So do you," she said. He took it from her, slowly. The way you accept something that's being given with weight rather than handed over with ease. She didn't say thank you. He didn't say you're welcome. That particular exchange would have diminished what had actually occurred between them, and they both understood this without discussing it, because they were both people who had spent their professional lives in a place where the most important things were the ones that went without saying. Doris Fenwick gave him one small nod. Then she turned and walked back the way she had come, back through the service corridor junction, back into the building that had been hers for 34 years and had just confirmed, through 11 days of quiet institutional correction, that it intended to remain so. Hale watched her go. Then he looked down at the folded paper in his gloved hand. He didn't open it. He knew what it said. He placed it in his inside breast pocket, next to the folded memo he hadn't filed and wouldn't, and returned to standing. Hands behind his back, eyes on the corridor, weight distributed evenly. The East Wing ground corridor looked exactly as it always had. Long, carpeted, lined with portraits of people who had wielded power in this building across 3 centuries. 2 service doors, 1 access point to the staff stairwell, 1 camera at the far end, now repositioned correctly, covering every angle it was supposed to cover. Hale had submitted the facility's request on day 1. It had been approved on day 4. Not because anyone had asked him to, because it needed doing, and he was the person standing there, and that had always been sufficient reason. The morning light came through the high corridor windows in long flat bars, moving slowly across the carpet, the way light always moves in large, quiet buildings, with the particular patience of something that has all the time it needs and is not trying to prove anything. Hale stood in it. His first posting at Buckingham Palace had been described in his transfer paperwork as a routine reassignment. Better suited, the language had said, which was the kind of language that told you nothing about what you were being sent to do and everything about the fact that someone already knew you were the right person to do it. He hadn't understood that when he arrived. He understood it now. The uniform was the same. The post was different. The duty was identical. It had just found a new corridor to require him in, a new silence to hold, a new line to stand behind until the right moment and the right flag and the right 11 days of quiet institutional movement brought a woman with a cardboard box back through the door she'd been shown out of. He hadn't needed to be thanked. He hadn't needed to be commended. He'd needed a folded piece of paper, 35 years old, with 4 words in pencil in the right-hand margin. This connects to Wentworth. It had connected to Voss. It had connected to a procurement authorization and a suppressed complaint, and 3 disappeared colleagues, and a removal notice citing a performance concern that 34 years of clean service made a quiet, absolute lie. And it had connected, finally, to a man standing in a corridor who had been told 11 times across 11 days that this wasn't his department, who had not once disagreed, who had simply continued to stand there anyway. Because the uniform doesn't transfer with the posting. The duty does. And duty doesn't ask whose department it is. It just asks if you're going to hold the line. Hale was going to hold the line. He always had been. He returned to standing. The corridor was quiet. The light moved slowly across the carpet. And Buckingham Palace, which had stood for 3 centuries and absorbed 1,000 things that never made the records, absorbed this one too, filed it in the permanent, wordless archive of things that happened inside its walls, because the right person was standing in the right hallway at the right moment, and refused to look the other way. What would you have done? If you were standing in that corridor and someone handed you a piece of paper 35 years old and walked away before you could answer, would you have opened it? Would you have made the calls? Would you have stood at your post on day 11 when every official signal said this wasn't yours to carry? Drop your answer in the comments. If this story stayed with you, like the video, subscribe, and turn on the bell. Because tomorrow there's another corridor, another line, another person who needs someone to simply refuse to walk away. Stay sharp, hold the line, and never let the silence decide for you.